For our final gesture drawing project, what we are going to do is we're going to create one final gesture drawing in front of an optical illusion design. So let's get into how we're going to do this. The first step for this project is you're going to create your gesture drawing of a human form in motion. What you can do is you can actually find a picture of um, a person doing some sort of athletic activity or just even in motion. If you are a soccer player, you can find someone who is in the position of like soccer pose, a dancer, things like swimming, surfing, things like that. And after you do that, you can use a mannequin that we have in class, or you can just use the picture of a mannequin, and you're going to attempt to draw that pose in the mannequin format. So you want to make sure that you are looking at all of the aspects of the mannequin and putting that pose onto paper. You're going to make sure that you do this on watercolor paper. It must take up the entire height of the watercolor paper because you do want it to be large and kind of be the focal point of your drawing. And as I said before, you can use the figurines to assist with your pose. The next step is to outline your figure in Sharpie. You can use a skinny Sharpie or a regular Sharpie. After that, you're going to paint the figure with watercolor. In the next slide, we're going to go over watercolor techniques, and then you will cut out the figure. Let's take a look at this quick video on how to go about doing some of these watercolor techniques. What we're going to be talking about right now is we're going to talk about different watercolor paint techniques. We are just going to be talking about them, and after you have learned all about some different watercolor techniques, you can then start to apply these techniques to your gesture drawing. So please just sit, watch, and listen. The first technique that we're going to be learning about is the wet on wet watercolor technique. So this is when you take your paintbrush, you put a little bit of water down on your paper, and then you're going to get some more water and put it on the paint palette. You can then start to apply the paint. As you can see, the paint actually spreads because the water that's on the paper also spreads. It creates a very cool design and a very cool look. So it's a really nice way to add color onto certain aspects of your paper. I'm going to be doing another technique now, and this is the wet on dry. So my paper is completely dry, and I'm making sure that my paint on my paint palette is very wet because I put a lot of water on it. And all I'm doing is I'm just starting to apply the paint evenly across the dry paper. So this is another nice technique that you can fill your paper with. Um, it makes it very bright. Obviously, the more color that you add, the darker your color will be. The less color that you add, the lighter color your color will be. Another technique that we're going to be doing is the dry brush technique. So this is when my paintbrush is pretty dry. I have a little bit of paint on, well, I'm sorry, a little bit of water on my yellow paint. And what I'm doing is I'm just brushing the paint that is somewhat dry. My paintbrush is very dry onto my paper, and I'm creating this almost streakiness technique. This is a technique you can use as well. It obviously doesn't have great coverage like the wet on dry technique, but it still creates a very cool look on your paper. The next watercolor technique we're going to be doing or talking about is the gradient watercolor technique. Okay, so what we do here is we take a paintbrush or our paintbrush and we start to apply some paint on top of our wherever we're painting. And what you can do is you can start to then add more water onto the bottom of wherever you're painting, and it creates this darker to lighter effect with your paintbrush. So it's almost like an ombre effect it's creating because it's dark on the top and then slowly getting to a lighter greenish color. You can do this with any color, obviously. The more paint that you apply on the top, and then the less paint that you apply on the bottom is going to make it look more dramatic. Sometimes I even take my finger or a paper towel and I'll start to dab away some of that extra paint so that it becomes more gradient. Okay. This is a nice technique as well. It can create some definition and some lights and darks into your painting, which is super fun. As I said, it's really important for these watercolor techniques that you do have a paper towel with you, because it just helps with, if you make a tiny mistake, you can always just take your paper towel and dab it on the spot that you want less coverage or less color. Um, so anyway, I'm just trying to play around, making it as smooth as possible. Obviously, it's going to look a little bit blotchy when it's wet, but then as it dries, it will become this really nice gradient effect where it goes from dark green to lighter green. You can even add some some white down there to kind of make it a little bit less of the color green that I'm working with. Um, but it's just a nice effect, as I said, in a lot of our paintings. Our next technique that we're going to be using, I'm going to be doing it twice. It's called the varied color watercolor technique. Okay, so this is and you could do this two separate ways. You can do it by putting water down on your paper first and then applying the paint. And then the reason why it's called varied is because you're actually applying two colors to kind of morph into one another. And this creates a really nice effect too. It's almost like a tie-dye effect. It looks really nice when you pick colors that are very close to one another. So, like for example, red and orange, when they mix together, they're not going to make like a brown or a dark black. Which is good. Same with purple and blue. You want to choose colors that, when they mix together, they don't turn into like a greenish brown color, unless that's the color you're looking for. It's really up to you. Okay, so once you have drawn your figure, you've also sharpied it, you then painted it, you are then going to wait till it dries to cut it out. You are then going to work on the background part of your artwork. So, this we're going to go a little bit into optical illusion art. Optical illusion or opt art is a style of visual art that uses optical illusions in order to create a weird sensation in our eyes. It kind of tricks our eyes into thinking things are moving. Op art works are abstract and they're typically black and white. And as I said before, these optical illusion types of art, they give the viewer the impression of movement, sometimes even hidden images, flashing and vibrating patterns, or even swelling or warping within the works of art. This was really influenced by other abstract artworks in the early 20th century. One of the most famous op art artists is Bridget Riley. She was born in 1931 in London. She was an art teacher who was really inspired by abstract art, as I said, and really enjoyed creating works of art that disoriented the viewer. She's really known for her illusions that induce these weird sensations to the viewer's eyes, as I said, such as like the pulsating, the vibrations, the distortions that you can see here. If you take a look at one of her artworks on this next slide, you can see that obviously it seems like a pretty simple work of art, but it's actually really intense. Um, while I'm looking at this, and I'm hoping you can see the same, it almost looks like the lines are moving just because of that optical illusion. She was really strategic with her placement of line and the colors. It almost looks like it's pulsating and kind of flowing, which is a really interesting effect that view at artwork can have on your eyes, even though it's really not moving. So for step number 5, you are going to start by brainstorming op art designs. There are a few located on Google Classroom, and you can look at those or you can look at your own. Um, Step 6, after you have done some brainstorming, remember you can brainstorm by observing, sketching, things like that. You're then going to take a drawing paper and you are going to start to create your own optical illusions on the background paper with a Sharpie. If you want to do it in pencil first, you can, but then I would go over in Sharpie to make it more profound. As you can see here to the right, I have created some of my optical illusion art. After you have finished your background, you are then going to do step number 7. I have these little foam pieces that I have cut out for you. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a hot glue gun and you're going to glue the foam pieces on the back of the figure with hot glue. You want to put a decent amount of these foam pieces on because you want the entire thing to almost protrude off of the paper. Some things to remember about glue gun safety. Remember, never touch the tip of the glue gun, even the glue that comes out of the glue gun. You can always use a craft stick or even a Q-tip or even like a toothpick to remove excess glue off of your paper. Remember, glue guns really stay hot for a long time, even after they're unplugged. So just please be mindful of that. And remember that glue guns are not a toy. This is a tool that is used appropriately for art purposes. Step number 8 is you're going to glue the figure to the background paper. So what I did is I placed a dot of hot glue on each foam piece, and then I attached it and pushed it down onto the background paper. And that's all I have for you. I'm looking forward to see your work, and I hope you enjoy.